Hello, dear listeners. I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you into a peaceful and relaxing journey tonight. If you're using this story to wind down and drift off to sleep, I'm so glad you've joined me. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment of calm. I'd also love to know, where are you from and what time is it where you are? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let the soothing story help you relax and unwind. The sun was low in the sky, casting long golden beams that danced across the wildflowers in the meadow. The air was filled with the gentle hum of bees, the soft whisper of wind brushing through tall grass, and the distant chirping of crickets preparing for the evening song. It was the kind of quiet, magical hour where the world felt both old and new, like a timeless place untouched by worries. At the edge of the meadow stood Lila, a woman who carried the weight of the world in her eyes. Life had been demanding lately, and she had come here seeking a respite, a place to breathe, to find clarity. This meadow had once been a sanctuary for her, a place she visited often in her youth when her heart felt light and her dreams were endless. But it had been years since she last stepped foot here. Now, the path that stretched out before her seemed like an invitation, one she couldn't resist. Taking a deep breath, Lila stepped forward onto the path, feeling the familiar softness of the earth beneath her feet. The ground was still warm from the sun, and the gentle breeze carried a sweet scent of blooming flowers. As she walked, she felt a subtle shift within herself, like she was shedding layers of tension with each step. It was as if the meadow had sensed her troubles and was offering its own form of quiet healing. The path led her deeper into the meadow, where the tall grasses parted, revealing a small grove of trees ahead. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a shimmering green canopy overhead. Lila paused for a moment, closing her eyes, letting the sounds of the meadow fill her senses, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the soft murmur of a hidden stream. It felt like the world was speaking to her, telling her she had made the right choice to come here. As she continued walking, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. The path, which used to be a simple dirt trail, now had faint silvery markings running along its edges. They shimmered like stardust in the fading light. Lila crouched down to inspect them, reaching out her hand. The moment her fingers brushed against the markings, she felt a warmth spread through her, as though the meadow itself was greeting her like an old friend. "Welcome back," a voice seemed to whisper, though no one was around. Startled, Lila stood up quickly, looking around. The meadow was empty, just as it had been when she arrived. But the feeling of being watched, of being in the presence of something unseen, lingered. It wasn't unsettling, though. It felt comforting, like a gentle nudge from a loving hand. Lila shook her head, smiling to herself. Perhaps she was imagining things. It wouldn't be the first time this place had sparked her imagination. She continued along the path, the silver markings glinting beside her, guiding her deeper into the meadow. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Lila found herself approaching a small clearing. In the center stood an old stone well, covered in moss and vines. She had never seen this well before. It was as if it had appeared out of nowhere, hidden all these years until this very moment. Curious, she stepped closer. The well seemed ancient, with carvings along its rim that were worn smooth by time. She ran her fingers over them, feeling a strange pull in her chest, as if the well held secrets meant just for her. "Make a wish," the voice whispered again, softer this time, like the rustling of leaves. Lila looked around, half expecting to see someone emerge from the trees, but she was alone. Her heart raced, but not out of fear. It was excitement, a sense of childlike wonder she hadn't felt in years. She leaned over the edge of the well, peering into its depths. The water below was crystal clear, reflecting the sky and the first few stars that had begun to appear. What would I wish for? She wondered aloud. The answer came to her almost instantly. She would wish for peace, not just a momentary escape from her troubles, but a deeper, lasting peace that would settle her restless mind and soothe her weary heart. She closed her eyes and made her wish, feeling a wave of calm wash over her as she did. When she opened her eyes, she saw something strange. The water in the well had started to ripple, though there was no wind. The ripples spread outward, and in the center of the well, a single silver lily floated to the surface. Lila's breath caught in her throat. The lily glowed faintly, as if it held the light of the moon within its petals. Hesitantly, she reached out and plucked the flower from the water. It was cool to the touch, yet it warmed her fingers as she held it. The moment she took the flower, the markings on the path began to glow brighter, illuminating the way ahead. It was as though the meadow was inviting her to continue her journey, to follow the path wherever it might lead. Lila felt a new sense of purpose welling up inside her. She tucked the silver lily into her pocket, the petals peeking out like a tiny beacon of light. The path through the meadow seemed different now, more vibrant, more alive. It was no longer just a walk. It was an adventure, a journey with a destination she couldn't yet see, but was eager to discover. As the first stars dotted the sky, Lila took a deep breath and stepped forward, following the glowing path into the unknown. The night settled over the meadow like a velvet curtain, dotted with the sparkling light of countless stars. The moon, full and bright, cast a silvery glow on the path ahead of Lila. The silver markings along the trail shimmered in the moonlight, leading her deeper into the forest's edge. There was a stillness in the air, a silence that felt both comforting and full of anticipation, like the quiet before a beautiful song begins. Lila's heart beat steadily, her fingers brushing against the silver lily tucked into her pocket. It felt like a small living heartbeat against her palm, a gentle reminder of the wish she had made at the well. Her wish for peace lingered in her thoughts, but she couldn't help feeling that this path was leading her to something more, something she had yet to uncover. As she walked, the tall grasses swayed gently, moved not by the wind, but by some unseen force, almost as if the meadow itself were breathing, alive with a quiet energy. The sounds of the night enveloped her, the distant call of an owl, the soft rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the faint ripple of water from a hidden stream. Lila felt as though the meadow was speaking to her in its own language, one she was only just beginning to understand. Suddenly, a cool breeze swept through the trees, carrying with it a soft, melodic whisper. It was faint at first, like a sigh carried on the wind, but it grew stronger as Lila stood still, listening. The whisper was not like the rustling of leaves. It felt intentional, as though someone, or something, was trying to communicate with her. "Lila," the voice murmured, barely louder than the breeze itself. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't imagined it. The voice was real. It knew her name. Her first instinct was to look around, but she could see no one. The path behind her was empty, the meadow quiet. Yet the whisper continued, gentle and persistent, like a distant call echoing through a dream. "Follow the wind. Trust the path," the voice urged. The silver markings along the trail seemed to pulse in response, a soft light that guided her forward. Lila felt a shiver run down her spine, but it wasn't fear. It was a feeling of being called, of being chosen for something she didn't yet understand. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and decided to trust the voice, to trust the path. As she continued walking, the breeze grew warmer, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. The meadow began to change, the grasses parting to reveal patches of wildflowers in full bloom, lavender, bluebells, and bright golden poppies. The flowers seemed to glow softly in the moonlight, creating a natural tapestry that stretched out before her. In the center of this floral expanse, she spotted a small wooden bench. It looked weathered and old, but it was placed deliberately, facing out towards the open sky. Lila hadn't seen this bench before, but it felt familiar, like a memory from her childhood. She approached it slowly, her fingers trailing along its smooth, worn wood before she sat down. The moment she settled, the breeze returned, this time stronger, swirling around her in a playful dance. It felt like the wind was alive, almost sentient, and it carried with it a multitude of whispers, soft, indistinct voices, like a chorus of gentle murmurs. Lila closed her eyes, letting the sounds wash over her, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "We've been waiting," one voice said, barely audible above the breeze. "Do not fear the unknown," another whispered, a soothing, melodic tone. Lila opened her eyes, her gaze drifting up to the sky. The stars seemed brighter than ever, forming patterns she had never noticed before, constellations that resembled flowers, birds, and flowing streams. It was as if the sky itself was speaking to her, showing her something she had been too preoccupied to see. "Who are you?" she asked aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. For a moment, the wind stilled and the meadow fell silent. Then, a single soft voice answered, clearer than the rest. "We are the guardians of this land, the spirits of the meadow. We remember you, Lila. You came here as a child, with your laughter and your dreams. You brought joy to this place, and now you have returned, seeking answers." Lila felt a lump form in her throat. Memories flashed through her mind, days spent playing in the meadow, chasing butterflies, lying in the grass and staring up at the sky with her mother beside her. It was a time when life felt simple and full of endless possibilities. But those days had slipped away, buried beneath years of worry and loss. "I've lost that part of myself," Lila admitted, her voice breaking. "I came here because I needed to remember, to find something I lost a long time ago." The wind swirled around her once more, gentle and understanding. "The path you walk is not just through the meadow, Lila. It's a journey into your own heart. You are not lost. You are finding your way back to who you've always been." Lila nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope, a sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. She looked down at the silver lily still nestled in her pocket, its glow now brighter, as if it too was a part of this moment of clarity. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "Keep walking," the voice replied, gentle but firm. "The path will show you the way. Trust it, and trust yourself." The wind died down, leaving behind a profound silence. The meadow, bathed in moonlight, felt like a sanctuary, a place out of time. Lila stood up from the bench, taking one last look at the flowers, the stars, the sky that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken secrets. She took a deep breath and stepped back onto the path, feeling lighter, as if she had shed a burden she didn't even realize she was carrying. The meadow stretched out before her, a sea of silver and green, and she knew that she was ready to continue her journey, wherever it might lead. The moonlight bathed the meadow in a soft, silver glow, illuminating the path that stretched ahead of Lila. The silver markings along the trail glimmered like threads of moonlight woven into the earth, guiding her deeper into the unknown. As she walked, the night seemed alive with anticipation, the air filled with a hushed, expectant silence. It was as if the meadow itself held its breath, watching her every step. Lila's thoughts drifted back to the whispers she had heard, the voices of the meadow's guardians. They had spoken of her childhood, of the joy she once brought to this place. The memory filled her with a bittersweet longing, a reminder of the person she used to be. She hadn't realized how much she missed that version of herself until this very moment. The path led her to a dense thicket of trees at the far edge of the meadow. The trees were old and gnarled, their branches twisted together like the fingers of ancient hands. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Lila hesitated for a moment, feeling a flicker of uncertainty. This part of the meadow was unfamiliar to her, shrouded in shadows that seemed to dance and shift in the moonlight. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, pushing through the low-hanging branches. The leaves brushed against her skin, cool and soft, like a caress from the night itself. On the other side, she emerged into a small, hidden grove. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The grove was circular, surrounded by tall, ancient trees that seemed to form a protective barrier around the space. In the center, a small pond reflected the moonlight, its surface shimmering like liquid silver. The air here was still, almost sacred, filled with a palpable sense of peace. Lila walked slowly towards the pond, her eyes wide with wonder. The water was so clear that she could see the smooth, round stones lining the bottom. Tiny ripples danced across the surface, though there was no breeze. It felt like the pond was alive, responding to her presence. As she knelt beside the water, she noticed something peculiar. The silver markings from the path continued here, etched into the stones around the edge of the pond. They formed intricate patterns, swirling and looping in shapes that seemed almost like runes. Lila traced one of the markings with her finger, feeling a warmth spread through her hand, as though the stone itself were alive. Before she could make sense of it, the surface of the pond began to ripple again. This time, the ripples gathered in the center, forming a small whirlpool. Lila watched, mesmerized, as the whirlpool grew, its center glowing with a soft blue light. The light spread, casting a gentle glow over the entire grove. A figure began to take shape in the water, like a reflection that wasn't her own. It was the image of a woman, her features delicate and serene, with hair that seemed to flow like water itself. She looked at Lila with eyes that held the depth of the ocean and the wisdom of the ages. "Welcome, Lila," the figure said, her voice like the sound of a distant stream. "I am the spirit of the grove, a guardian of this sacred place. You have been guided here because your heart seeks answers." Lila's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, but the words seemed to stick. The spirit's presence was calming yet overwhelming, like standing before the vastness of the sea. I don't know what I'm looking for," Lila finally managed to say. "I came here because I felt lost." The spirit smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "You are not lost, child. You are on a journey of remembering. You have forgotten the songs you once sang, the joy you once felt. The path through this meadow is a path into your own soul." Lila frowned, trying to make sense of the spirit's words. "But why now? Why have I been called back here after so many years?" The spirit's gaze softened, her eyes full of understanding. "Because the world has weighed heavily on your heart. You have carried burdens that were not meant for you to bear alone. The meadow remembers you, Lila. It remembers the light you once carried, and it has called you back to help you find it again." Tears welled up in Lila's eyes. She hadn't realized how heavy her heart had become until now, standing here in the presence of the spirit. It was as if the grove had lifted a veil, revealing the raw, aching truth she had buried deep inside. "I don't know if I can find that light again," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "So much has changed." The spirit reached out, her hand skimming the surface of the pond. Where her fingers touched the water, tiny flowers bloomed, their petals glowing softly in the moonlight. "The light has never left you," she said gently. "It has only been covered by shadows, but shadows are fleeting, and the light within you is eternal." Lila watched the flowers bloom, her heart softening with each delicate petal that opened. She realized then that the spirit wasn't just talking about the meadow. She was talking about Lila herself. The parts of her that had been hidden away, forgotten, but not lost. Trust the path, the spirit continued. Follow it with an open heart, and you will find what you seek. The meadow will guide you, as it always has. Lila nodded, wiping away a tear. She felt lighter somehow, as if the weight she had been carrying had eased just a little. She looked at the spirit, gratitude welling up inside her. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The spirit gave her one last serene smile. "Go now, child. The night is long, but the dawn always comes. And when it does, you will see the world with new eyes." With that, the image in the pond began to fade, the blue light dissolving into the ripples once more. The grove returned to its quiet stillness, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Lila stood, feeling a sense of resolve she hadn't felt in years. She turned back to the path, ready to continue her journey. As she stepped away from the grove, the silver markings pulsed softly beneath her feet, lighting the way forward. The night was dark, but the path ahead was illuminated with a quiet, comforting glow. Lila took a deep breath and stepped forward, trusting in the promise of the dawn to come. The night sky stretched endlessly above Lila, a velvet canvas painted with constellations that seemed to dance as she moved along the path. The silver markings beneath her feet glimmered softly, guiding her onward like the trail of a comet. The meadow, with its gentle swaying grasses and whispering trees, felt alive with a sense of quiet anticipation. Lila's encounter with the spirit of the grove lingered in her mind, her words like a melody that played softly in the background of her thoughts. "The light has never left you." Those words wrapped around her heart like a warm embrace, easing a loneliness she hadn't realized she carried. She felt different now, lighter yet filled with a new kind of curiosity. It was as if the meadow were not just a place, but a journey of discovery, both outward and inward. The path led her closer to the sound of flowing water, a gentle murmur that grew louder with every step. The air cooled as she neared the source of the sound, the sweet scent of fresh water mingling with the earthy fragrance of the meadow. Soon she found herself standing at the edge of a wide, slow-moving river, its surface reflecting the moonlight like 1,000 shards of silver. The river stretched across the landscape, winding its way through the meadow like a ribbon of liquid moonlight. On its banks the grass was lush and green, dotted with tiny white flowers that seemed to glow softly in the night. Lila knelt by the water's edge, dipping her fingers into the cool, clear current. It felt refreshing, like a gentle caress that soothed her weary mind. As she looked into the water, she noticed something strange. The river wasn't just reflecting the night sky, it was showing images, memories, like scenes from a film playing just beneath the surface. Lila leaned closer, her breath hitching in surprise. The first image she saw was of a little girl with wild, curly hair, laughing as she splashed in a puddle. It took her a moment to recognize the child. It was her, many years ago. She watched as the girl ran through the meadow, her mother chasing after her with a smile. Lila felt a pang of nostalgia, the memories so vivid that she could almost hear their laughter echoing in the air. As she continued to watch, the scene changed. She saw herself as a teenager, sitting beneath a tree, her head bent over a sketchbook. She remembered this moment, the peace she felt as she drew, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the page. It was a time when she felt most like herself, before the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. The river flowed on, the images shifting like the turning pages of a storybook. Lila saw herself as a young woman, standing at the edge of the meadow, staring out at the horizon with a look of uncertainty. It was the day she had left this place, the last time she had been here before tonight. She remembered the feelings that had filled her then, the excitement of new possibilities, but also the fear of the unknown. A tear slipped down her cheek as she watched. It was as if the river was showing her the pieces of herself she had forgotten, moments that had been lost in the rush of life. She realized now how much she had changed, how far she had drifted from the girl who used to dance barefoot in the grass, who believed in magic and wonder. Suddenly, the images in the water grew darker, the scenes more turbulent. She saw herself in the city, her face lined with stress and exhaustion, sitting alone at her desk late at night. The memory was sharp, filled with the sound of traffic and the harsh glow of artificial lights. It was a stark contrast to the soft, natural world around her now. Lila's heart ached as she watched. She had forgotten how to find joy in the simple things, how to be present in the moment. She had become so focused on the demands of her life that she had lost touch with the part of herself that felt most real. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It was a question directed at the river, at the meadow, at whatever unseen force was guiding her on this journey. The water rippled gently in response, the surface smoothing out once more. Lila's reflection gazed back at her, but it was different this time. She didn't just see the woman she had become, but a blend of who she was now and who she used to be. A composite of all the moments she had lived, the joys and the sorrows, the light and the shadows. It was then that she realized the river wasn't just showing her memories. It was offering her a chance to reconcile with them, to embrace every part of her journey, even the parts she had tried to forget. The river was a mirror, not just of her past, but of her soul. With a deep breath, Lila stood, wiping away the tears that had fallen. The night was quiet again, the only sound the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, a softening in her heart. The river had given her a gift, the gift of remembering, of reconnecting with the pieces of herself she had lost along the way. She looked up at the sky, the moonlight now softer, more golden, as if the moon itself was smiling down at her. The path continued on the other side of the river, a narrow bridge of stepping stones crossing the water. They glowed with the same silver light that marked the trail, inviting her to continue. Lila stepped onto the first stone, the cool water swirling around her ankles. She felt a surge of courage, a newfound determination. She wasn't sure where this path would lead her next, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead. As she crossed the river, the images faded, leaving only the rippling surface of the water behind. The meadow waited for her on the other side, vast and open, filled with endless possibilities. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, and stepped forward. The path stretched out before her, illuminated by the soft, guiding light of the silver markings, and Lila walked on, her heart lighter, her steps surer, as the meadow welcomed her deeper into its embrace. The night sky arched above Lila like a dark, shimmering canopy as she continued along the glowing path. The meadow felt vast and endless, but there was a sense of comfort in its openness, as though the meadow itself were embracing her. She could still feel the cool water of the river on her ankles, the memory of the images she had seen lingering in her mind like fragments of an old dream. The gentle breeze that had been her companion all night picked up, rustling the tall grasses and causing them to sway like waves in the ocean. It carried with it the soft scent of wildflowers and something else, something familiar that Lila couldn't quite place. It was a sweet, musical sound, like the faint notes of a distant melody. She paused, tilting her head to listen more closely. The wind was singing. It was not just the sound of the breeze through the leaves, but a real, hauntingly beautiful song carried on the currents of the air. The melody was soft and slow, like a lullaby sung by the night itself. Lila felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the sheer, unexpected beauty of it. She followed the sound, her feet moving almost of their own accord as the song pulled her deeper into the meadow. The path curved gently, leading her toward a cluster of tall silver birch trees. Their pale trunks glowed in the moonlight, and their leaves danced like tiny silver coins in the breeze, shimmering and clinking together in harmony with the wind's song. As she entered the grove of birch trees, the air seemed to change. It was cooler here, filled with the crisp scent of the leaves. The wind sang louder now, the notes clearer and more distinct. It was a song of longing, of joy and sorrow intertwined. Lila closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, feeling it resonate deep within her chest. Suddenly, she heard a soft voice humming along with the wind's song. Lila's eyes snapped open and she looked around, startled. There, sitting on a low branch of the largest birch tree, was a small, delicate figure. It was a woman, no taller than a child, with long hair that seemed to shimmer with the colors of the dawn. Her dress was woven from leaves and petals, fluttering around her like the wings of a butterfly. "Hello, Lila," the figure said, her voice as light as a summer breeze. Lila blinked, taken aback. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled, a soft, mysterious smile. "I know many things," she replied. "I am one of the keepers of the meadow. My name is Silver, Spirit of the Wind." Lila felt a rush of amazement. "The wind? It's singing," she said, looking around as the melody continued to swirl around them. Silver nodded, her eyes twinkling. "The wind carries the songs of the earth," she explained. "It sings of the past and the present, of the joys and sorrows of all who have walked this path. It sings your song too, Lila." "My song?" Lila echoed, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes," Silver said gently. "Listen closely." Lila closed her eyes again, focusing on the melody. At first it sounded the same, soft and haunting. But then she began to hear something different. Beneath the main tune, there was a familiar melody, one she hadn't heard in years. It was a song her mother used to sing to her when she was a child, a lullaby filled with love and warmth. The sound of it brought tears to Lila's eyes. "It remembers you," Silver said softly. "The wind, the trees, the very earth beneath your feet. They all remember the ones who walked here with love in their hearts. Your song is part of this place, Lila. It always has been." Lila opened her eyes, wiping away a tear. "I had forgotten," she said, her voice breaking. "I had forgotten how much this place meant to me, how much I felt a part of it." "We all forget sometimes," Silver said kindly. "The world outside can be loud and demanding. It drowns out the quieter songs of the heart. But the meadow never forgets. It sings your song back to you, hoping you will remember." Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of being seen and understood in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if the wind itself were hugging her, wrapping her in a blanket of memories and love. "What do I do now?" Lila asked, looking up at Silver. The wind spirit's smile softened. "You listen," she said simply. "Listen to the song. Follow where it leads you. The meadow has much more to show you, and your journey is far from over." Lila nodded, taking a deep breath. The song of the wind was gentler now, a soothing hum that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. She felt calmer, more grounded, as though the very earth beneath her feet were lending her its strength. "Thank you, Silver," Lila said, her voice filled with gratitude. Silver gave a small nod, her eyes filled with an ancient wisdom. "Go well, Lila," she said. "The wind will always carry your song wherever you may go." With that, the wind spirit leapt from the branch, dissolving into a flurry of leaves that were carried away on the breeze. The grove of birch trees was quiet once more, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves whispering secrets to the night. Lila took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cool, fragrant air. The path stretched out before her, glowing softly in the moonlight. The song of the wind lingered in her ears, a melody that she knew would stay with her long after this night was over. She stepped forward, her heart lighter, her spirit lifted by the music that filled the air. The meadow felt like a living, breathing entity, guiding her gently, like a parent guiding a child. And Lila, for the first time in years, felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The night was deepening, but Lila knew that she was not alone. The meadow was with her, singing her song, carrying her forward on the path she was destined to walk. She took another step, then another, letting the music guide her into the unknown, her heart open and her mind at peace. And so, she continued onward, into the depths of the night, trusting in the song that had found its way back into her heart. Lila's footsteps were soft on the earth as she continued along the silver-marked path. The melody of the wind's song still lingered in her mind, like a tune hummed softly in the background of her thoughts. It was as if the meadow itself had come alive with music, its gentle rhythms and harmonies guiding her deeper into its heart. The night air was cool and crisp, filled with the scent of dew-kissed grass and blooming night flowers. Ahead of her, the path began to slope gently upwards, leading toward a small rise. Lila felt a sense of anticipation building within her. She couldn't explain why, but it was as though something significant lay just beyond the next hill. With each step, the sense of wonder grew, until she reached the top of the rise and stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. Below her, the meadow opened up into a wide, moonlit glade. It was filled with a sea of lanterns, each one glowing softly like a tiny star. The lanterns floated just above the ground, bobbing gently in the breeze, their warm light casting a golden glow over the tall grasses. They seemed to sway in time with an unseen rhythm, creating a dance of light that was both mesmerizing and soothing. Lila stepped into the glade, her eyes wide with awe. She could feel the warmth of the lanterns, like the gentle glow of a campfire on a chilly night. They seemed almost magical, as if they were alive. She reached out a hand to touch one, hesitating slightly before her fingers brushed against the soft light. The lantern flickered gently at her touch, and then an image appeared within its glowing center. It was a memory, her memory. She saw herself as a child, sitting on her grandmother's lap, listening to a bedtime story. The room was dimly lit, the soft crackle of the fireplace filling the air. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice, the way it wove tales of far-off lands and magical creatures. Lila's heart ached with the sweetness of the memory, a wave of nostalgia washing over her. She pulled her hand back, blinking away the tears that had sprung to her eyes. As she did, the lantern's image faded, returning to its gentle golden glow. Lila took a deep breath, her emotions swirling like leaves caught in a gust of wind. "These lanterns hold our memories," a voice said softly behind her. Lila turned quickly, finding herself face to face with an elderly woman. The woman's hair was long and silver, flowing down her back like moonlight. She wore a simple dress of deep blue, the color of the night sky, and her eyes sparkled with a youthful light, despite the lines of age etched on her face. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice filled with wonder. "I am Maris," the woman replied, her voice gentle and soothing. "Keeper of the lanterns." "The lanterns of memory," Lila said, looking around at the glowing orbs that filled the glade. "They show our memories?" Maris nodded. "Yes, each lantern holds a fragment of someone's past, a moment of joy, a whisper of sorrow, a piece of love or loss. They float here, held by the meadow, to remind us of who we are and where we have come from." Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. "Why are they here?" she asked. "Why show these memories now?" Maris smiled kindly. "Because you are ready to remember," she said simply. "The meadow has guided you here to this place, so you can see the pieces of your heart that you have forgotten. It is part of your journey." Lila looked down at the lantern nearest her, its warm light flickering gently. "I've forgotten so much," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been so caught up in everything else that I lost touch with these memories." "We all do at times," Maris said, stepping closer. "The world is full of noise, full of distractions. It's easy to lose sight of what truly matters, but the meadow remembers. It keeps these moments safe, like treasures waiting to be rediscovered." Lila felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. Instead, she reached out and gently cupped the lantern in her hands. It flickered, and another image appeared within its glow. This time, it was a more recent memory. Lila standing on a busy city street, the noise and bustle of traffic all around her. She looked tired, worn down, as if the weight of the world were pressing on her shoulders. She remembered that moment well. It was the day she realized she needed a change, the day she decided to leave the city behind and come back to this place. "I was lost," Lila said softly. "And yet, you found your way back," Maris replied. "You followed the song of your own heart, even when you couldn't hear it clearly." Lila looked up at the elder woman, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. "The path isn't just through the meadow," she realized aloud. "It's a path through myself, through my own memories and emotions." Maris's smile deepened and she nodded. "Yes, Lila, the path is both within and without. It leads you through the meadow, but it also leads you back to yourself." Lila took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace settle over her like a warm blanket. She looked around at the lanterns, their golden light filling the glade with a sense of quiet joy. Each one was a memory, a piece of someone's heart, floating here like a tiny beacon of light in the darkness. "Can I take one with me?" Lila asked, her voice filled with a childlike hope. Maris shook her head gently. "These lanterns must stay here in the meadow, but their light will stay with you in your heart. You don't need the physical lantern, Lila. The memories are already a part of you." Lila nodded slowly, understanding. She took one last look at the lantern she held, then gently released it. It floated back into the air, bobbing gently as it drifted away. The glade seemed to sigh softly, as though it too were letting go of something precious but not lost. Maris stepped back, her form fading slightly in the moonlight. "Go well, Lila," she said. "The path will guide you, as it always has. Trust it, and trust yourself." With a final, kind smile, Maris disappeared, blending into the night like mist. The glade was quiet again, filled only with the soft glow of the lanterns and the rustling of the wind. Lila took a deep breath, feeling lighter, more whole than she had in years. She turned back to the path, its silver markings shimmering in the moonlight. The meadow felt like it was breathing around her, alive and vibrant, its energy filling her with strength. And so, with her heart full of light, Lila continued on her way, following the path that led deeper into the night and into the depths of her own soul. The air felt cooler now, as if the meadow itself were preparing for the quiet of the coming dawn. Lila walked deeper into the night, her footsteps light and steady, her heart carrying the warmth of the lantern's glow. She had learned much already, but the path still stretched out before her, and the meadow whispered that there was more to uncover, more to understand. After a while, the path began to descend gently, and the ground became softer, more yielding beneath her feet. The grasses thinned out, giving way to a small, clear river. Its waters shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting the stars above with a soft, silvery glow. The river moved with a calm, purposeful flow, winding its way through the meadow like a gentle thread weaving through fabric. Lila stopped at the edge of the river, looking down at its smooth surface. The water was clear, but as she gazed into it, the reflections she saw weren't just of the trees and the sky. They were of herself, but not just the Lila of now. She saw the child she once was, playing with her friends in the fields near her home. She saw the young woman she had been, full of dreams and ambitions, standing on the edge of the city, ready to leave everything behind in search of something more. She saw moments of joy and sorrow, of laughter and tears, all of them rippling across the surface like fleeting shadows. The river of reflection, she realized, didn't just mirror what was in front of it. It held the entire story of her life, laid out before her like a tapestry woven from time. She bent down, cupping her hands and dipping them into the cool water. As she did, the ripples disturbed the reflections, and the images changed. A new scene appeared, a memory she hadn't thought of in years. It was her mother, sitting in the kitchen, humming a gentle tune as she prepared dinner. Lila could almost smell the scent of roasting vegetables, the warmth of the home they had shared. Her mother looked up, and their eyes met, and in that moment, Lila saw a deep love and understanding that she had never fully realized before. It was a memory full of quiet comfort, of knowing that she had been loved deeply, completely. Lila's heart tightened as she watched the image shift and fade, replaced by another moment. The day she had left home, the day she had decided to set out on her own. She had been filled with excitement, yes, but there was also fear, the kind that comes with stepping into the unknown. And yet, she had gone, believing that the world outside was where she truly belonged. As the memories swirled around her, the river's surface began to ripple more intensely, as though the water itself were responding to her thoughts. Lila felt something shift within her, a deep understanding of the path she had walked and the choices she had made. She had been searching for meaning, for purpose, and now she could see that it had always been there, woven into every moment of her life. But as the memories continued to dance across the water, she saw something else. There were moments of regret, of pain and lost opportunities. The times she had hurt others or been hurt herself. The moments she had chosen fear over love or had doubted herself when she should have trusted her heart. These memories didn't linger as long as the others, but they were there, undeniable. "Do not be afraid to look at them," a voice said softly behind her. Lila turned quickly to find an older man standing at the river's edge, his eyes kind and knowing. His hair was white, but his posture was strong, and there was a quiet wisdom in the way he held himself. He wore a cloak made of deep green fabric that seemed to shimmer with the colors of the meadow. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "I am Arian," the man replied with a gentle smile. "Keeper of the river of reflection." Lila's gaze returned to the water, the images still shifting and changing before her. "The river shows me my past," she said. "But why? What is it trying to teach me?" Arian nodded, stepping closer. "The river holds the truth of your journey, Lila. It shows you not only the moments of joy, but also the moments of loss and regret. It is through seeing these moments clearly that you can truly understand the path you have walked." "I don't know if I want to see them," Lila said, her voice trembling slightly. "The regrets, the mistakes." "Regret is only the absence of understanding," Arian said gently. "We regret because we have not yet learned from the past. The river does not judge you, Lila. It simply shows you what has been. What you do with that knowledge is up to you." Lila gazed at the river, its surface calm once more. She reached out her hand, letting her fingers skim the water's edge. The memories continued to flow, and she realized something profound in that moment. She wasn't defined by her mistakes. She was defined by how she chose to move forward, by the lessons she had learned, and by the love she had carried with her all along. "I've spent so much time trying to change the past," she said softly, "but I see now that what matters is what I do now, in this moment." Arian smiled. "Exactly. The past is a part of you, but it does not have to define you. You are not your mistakes, Lila. You are the choices you make in the present. You are the love you give and the hope you hold on to. The river shows you what has been, but it also shows you what can be." Lila looked down at the water once more, the reflection of her face staring back at her. She saw the woman she had become, the one standing here now, on the edge of this river, understanding at last that her journey was not one of perfection, but one of growth. She stood up, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders, replaced by a newfound lightness. The river's current flowed steadily, its gentle whisper filling the air with a sense of peace. "Thank you," she said, looking at Arian. "You are welcome," he replied, his voice like the soft rustle of leaves. "Go forward with understanding, Lila. The river will always be here when you need to reflect. But now, you must continue your journey." Lila nodded, a sense of clarity settling deep within her. She turned away from the river, following the path once more, knowing that the next step would be one of freedom, not from the past, but through it. And as she walked, the river's reflection remained with her, a constant reminder that the past, though it shaped her, did not hold her prisoner. The river had shown her the truth, and now it was time to step into the light of the present. The path before Lila continued to stretch out through the meadow, and with each step, she felt the weight of the world she had once known slip further and further behind her. The air was soft, the cool breeze moving through the grasses, as if the meadow were guiding her forward, step by step, towards something important. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its light over the meadow and weaving shadows beneath the trees. Lila walked quietly, her mind still turning over the lessons of the river, the reflections that had shown her her past. But now, she felt something new, an invitation to silence. The river had spoken to her through memories, but now, the world around her seemed to be speaking in another language, one without words. As she walked, she noticed that the meadow began to change once again. The grasses grew denser, thicker, and the path wound its way through rows of tall wild flowers that had begun to bloom in every color imaginable. But as she moved deeper into the thicket of blossoms, she realized that the air around her had grown quieter, unnaturally so. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Lila paused and looked around, the quiet enveloping her like a soft blanket. Not a single bird called, not a leaf rustled. The silence was complete. She looked ahead and saw that the path opened into a large, hidden garden. It was nestled between towering trees with gnarled branches, and the garden was full of flowers, but these were not the colorful blooms of the meadow. Instead, they were pale, almost ethereal, their petals glowing faintly in the dim light. They grew in patterns that formed spirals, waves, and intricate labyrinths on the ground. There were no sounds, no birds, no insects. The only thing that existed here, it seemed, was the stillness. Intrigued, Lila stepped forward into the garden. The moment she entered, she felt a subtle shift within herself. The stillness seemed to fill her, to calm the chaotic thoughts that had been swirling in her mind. It was as though the silence was not just a lack of noise, but a presence, a force that invited her to listen, not to the world around her, but to the deeper, quieter voice within. As she walked through the garden, she noticed something strange. Some of the flowers were shaped like delicate, translucent bells, their petals curved like the delicate fingers of a hand reaching out. Others had petals that shimmered with faint silver light, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. But the most peculiar thing of all was that the flowers appeared to be listening. Each one seemed to tremble slightly as if reacting to her presence, as though they were waiting for something. Lila's heart beat faster as she walked deeper into the garden, wondering what it was that these flowers could teach her. What was this place, where silence was the language of the land? As if in answer to her unspoken question, a figure appeared before her, standing at the center of the garden. The figure was a woman, draped in flowing white robes, her silver hair falling around her like a veil. Her eyes were closed, but Lila felt her gaze even without seeing it. She was standing perfectly still, as though one with the garden itself. "Welcome, Lila," the woman said, her voice like a soft breeze barely above a whisper. "I am Ilara, keeper of the garden of silent words." Lila stepped forward, her curiosity piqued. "The garden of silent words?" she asked. What does that mean?" Ilara smiled gently, and for the first time, Lila noticed the quiet joy in her expression. "Here in this garden, words are not spoken aloud. This is a place where one must listen, not with the ears, but with the heart. The flowers you see are not just beautiful, they are the keepers of thoughts and emotions that cannot be expressed by words. They hold the memories of what we feel, not what we say." Lila blinked, trying to absorb the meaning of this. "So, these flowers, they represent things that are unsaid?" "Yes," Ilara replied softly. "They hold all the feelings that we have not yet voiced. The words that we keep hidden deep inside. The silence here speaks of things we cannot always articulate. It is a place to come when you need to understand your feelings more clearly." Lila looked around, feeling a deep sense of peace settling over her. "I've spent so much time trying to find the right words," she said quietly, "but sometimes I don't know what to say." "That is why you have come here," Ilara said, her voice warm and understanding. "To learn that not all things need to be said aloud. Some truths are found in the silence. Some emotions are understood not by speaking, but by simply being, by allowing yourself to feel." Lila paused, letting the stillness sink into her. She could feel it now, the sense of deep understanding that came without the need for words. The flowers around her shimmered softly, as though they were breathing with her, their petals fluttering as if they too were waiting for something. "I've been so afraid of silence," Lila admitted. "I've always thought that if I didn't speak, people would misunderstand me. I thought silence was emptiness, but now I'm beginning to see it differently." Ilara nodded, her eyes still closed. "Silence is not emptiness. It is the space where understanding grows. It is in the quiet moments that we often hear the deepest truths. It is not absence, but presence." Lila's eyes fell on a particular flower, a white blossom shaped like a delicate spiral. Its petals pulsed gently, glowing faintly in the dim light. She stepped closer, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace as she watched it. She could feel it. The unspoken words. The things left unsaid, filling the garden with a language that didn't need sound to be understood. As Lila stood there, surrounded by the stillness, she felt something within her shift. The rest of the world had faded away, and she was left with the purest form of understanding, unspoken, unhurried, but deeply present. "The garden is yours now, Lila," Ilara said gently, her voice a soft hum in the quiet. "Take this silence with you whenever you need it. Let it guide you to the truth within yourself." Lila nodded slowly, her heart full. She realized that the words she had been searching for didn't need to be spoken aloud. She had found peace in the silence, and in that peace, she had found herself. With a final look at the garden, Lila turned and walked away, her steps light and calm, the lesson of the garden settling within her like a secret whisper she didn't need to speak to understand. And as she left the garden behind, she knew she would carry its silence with her, a language deeper than words, waiting for her whenever she needed it. Lila continued on her journey, the garden of silent words still echoing in her heart. The silence had taught her more than she had expected, how powerful it was to listen without the need for constant conversation, how to embrace stillness and reflect within herself. But now, as the path ahead stretched onward, she felt that there was another lesson waiting for her, a deeper understanding yet to be uncovered. The moon had risen higher, casting its soft light across the meadow and illuminating the path before her. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees above, and the night air carried with it the sweet scent of wildflowers. But Lila could sense a change in the atmosphere, a subtle shift that tugged at her heart. She stepped forward, drawn by a sense of something important ahead. As she moved deeper into the meadow, the trees grew thicker, their trunks more ancient, their branches reaching high into the sky like old, wise arms. She walked until she came upon a clearing where a massive, towering tree stood, its roots sprawling across the earth and its branches spreading wide, casting a shadow over the ground. The tree was unlike any Lila had seen before. Its bark was dark and textured, almost as though it had been carved by time itself. Its leaves were a deep, vibrant green, and they shimmered with a soft, golden light, as though they held the energy of the stars themselves. Lila approached the tree slowly, feeling the weight of its presence. There was something ancient about it, something familiar, yet distant. The tree seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as if it were alive in a way that went beyond its physical form. She could feel it in her bones, the pull of something powerful, something she needed to understand. As she stood before it, the tree spoke, its voice deep and resonant, vibrating through the very air around her. "Lila," the tree said, its voice both soothing and commanding, "I am the tree of choices. You have come to me because you are at a crossroads in your journey, and the time has come for you to make a choice." Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had been walking for so long, learning, growing, but she had never anticipated this moment. A choice. She looked up at the tree, trying to comprehend what it meant. "What kind of choice?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. The tree's branches rustled as if the wind was speaking through it. "You must choose the path that you will walk from here," it said. "This is a moment where your past and your future meet, and the decisions you make now will shape the direction of your journey. But be warned, Lila, the choice you make will not be easy, and it will require you to trust not only the path ahead, but also the wisdom within yourself." Lila's mind raced. She had already learned so much on her journey, the river of reflection, the garden of silent words. But now the stakes felt different. This was not just a question of understanding, it was a question of action. The choices she had made in the past had brought her here, but the choice before her would decide where she would go next. "I don't know what to choose," she confessed, feeling a pang of uncertainty in her chest. "How do I know which path is the right one?" The tree's branches swayed in the wind, and the golden leaves shimmered as though the tree were contemplating her question. "The right path is not always the easiest one, Lila," the tree said gently. "You must listen to your heart, for it knows the way. The paths before you will not always be clear, but if you trust in yourself, you will find the strength to walk them." Lila closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the quiet wisdom of the tree's words. She thought about the journey she had already undertaken, the lessons learned, the memories made, and she realized that it had always been about trust. Trusting the river to carry her through, trusting the silence to guide her, and now trusting herself. As she opened her eyes, she saw that the tree's branches had shifted, revealing two paths leading off from the clearing. The first path was wide and bright, bathed in the warm light of the moon. It seemed inviting, peaceful, almost too easy. The second path was narrower, shrouded in shadow, with a twist of fog lingering near the ground. The air around it felt cooler, and the path itself was less distinct, more uncertain. "Which path should I take?" Lila asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The tree's voice filled her ears again. "You must choose the path that calls to you, Lila. Do not choose because it seems easy, and do not avoid the difficult path because of fear. What you need lies in both paths, but it is your heart that will show you where to go." Lila stood still, her gaze shifting between the two paths. Her heart beat steadily in her chest, and as she watched the paths before her, she felt a wave of clarity wash over her. The first path, the one bathed in light, was comforting. It promised safety, warmth, and peace. But the second path, the shadowed one, felt uncertain, mysterious, and full of unknowns. It was not the easy choice, but something within her stirred. She knew that the real answer lay not in the comfort of the first path, but in the uncertainty of the second. It was the one that spoke to her heart, the one that asked her to trust herself fully, to step into the unknown and face what lay ahead with courage. Without hesitation, Lila stepped forward toward the shadowed path. The tree's voice echoed in the stillness. "The choice you have made is not without challenge, but it is the one that will lead you to your truest self. Trust in it, as you have trusted the path so far." Lila nodded, her heart swelling with determination. The journey ahead was not clear, but for the first time, she felt certain in her choice. It was hers to make, hers to walk. And as she stepped onto the shadowed path, the meadow seemed to fall away behind her, replaced by the soft whisper of the wind in the trees. With each step she took, she felt a deeper connection to herself, to the path, and to the wisdom that had guided her so far. The tree of choices had shown her that the most important choice was not one of ease, but one of trust. And with that trust, Lila knew she was ready for whatever came next. What choice will you make when faced with your own crossroads? Would you follow the path that seems easy, or would you trust yourself enough to walk the uncertain one? Lila walked deeper into the shadowed path, her feet carrying her forward with purpose. The tree behind her had already faded into the distance, but its wisdom remained in the back of her mind, echoing with each step she took. The night air was cooler now, and the shadows seemed to grow longer, yet Lila no longer feared them. There was a quiet assurance within her, an understanding that this path, though uncertain, was the one she was meant to walk. The path wound through the dense forest, and as she moved forward, the trees thinned and the shadows lessened. The soft glow of dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The fog that had once hung near the ground began to dissipate, revealing the path clearly for the first time. Lila felt the weight of the darkness lifting, as though each step she took was bringing her closer to something new, something important. Finally, the trees gave way to an open clearing. It was a vast, wide-open space, bathed in the soft light of the rising sun. The meadow before her was like the one she had first walked through, but there was something different now. The grass was tall, swaying gently in the wind, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers and earth. In the center of the clearing stood a small, serene pond, its surface shimmering in the light of the new day. Lila stood at the edge of the clearing, taking in the scene before her. The path behind her was no longer visible, and the road ahead was wide open, stretching into the horizon. For the first time in her journey, Lila felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She had walked through the meadow, the river, the garden of silence, and the tree of choices. Each place had offered her a lesson. Each step had brought her closer to understanding the world within herself. Now, in the clearing of new beginnings, she realized that the path she had walked was not just about the destination, but about the journey itself. The moments of reflection, the moments of silence, the moments of choice, each one had shaped her into who she was meant to become. The journey had not always been easy, but it had been hers, and that made all the difference. Lila walked toward the pond, her reflection shimmering on the surface of the water. She knelt down, her fingertips grazing the cool water. The ripples spread out from her touch, distorting her image, but she didn't mind. It was as if the water was showing her the truth, how change, movement, and growth were all part of the journey. She did not need to remain the same. She could evolve, learn, and embrace whatever came next. As Lila sat by the pond, she closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the meadow. The wind rustled through the tall grasses, and the birds sang softly in the distance. The world felt alive with possibility, and Lila knew that this was just the beginning. The path she had walked had led her here, but it was only one part of her journey. Now, as the sun rose higher in the sky, Lila stood up and took a deep breath. The clearing stretched out before her, full of endless possibilities. The journey ahead was hers to create, shaped by the choices she would make and the wisdom she had gained along the way. And so, Lila took the first step forward into the vast, open world, filled with hope and anticipation for what was to come. As she walked, she paused for a moment to look back at the meadow, the river, the garden, the tree, and all the lessons she had learned. She knew that each step, no matter how uncertain, had been part of something greater than she could have imagined. The journey was not over, it was only just beginning. And as she walked into the new day, she asked herself, what will you choose to carry with you on your own journey forward? Would you walk with the wisdom you've gathered, trusting that the path ahead will unfold as it should? Or will you hold on to the past, afraid of what might lie beyond the next step? The choice, as always, is yours.